can delve into different ways of checking measurement validity, optimally in terms of numbers, though the first one we start with is usually not expressed in terms of numbers. That is the question of face validity. The question here is, does the measurement plausibly capture the concept of interest? And this relates back to this conception of validity that I introduced before, the match between the data that we produce and the theoretical concept that we have through the measurement instrument. So is there a plausible way in which the way we measure things translates what reality has to say about this construct into a measurement that we interpret as the manifestation of this construct for the case that we're studying in reality? So can we plausibly assume this conjunction between the variable we have in our data, the concept, and the phenomenon? Do they align as we want them to align? And while face validity often is viewed as a substandard version of validity testing, this is in fact a severe simplification, because face validity is actually the strongest, though most basic kind of validity assessment that we can make. It is often a prerequisite for creating validity, and the reason why it's often viewed as the weakest evidence of validity is that it is standard procedure to ensure high face validity, because this is just so important and basic that you kind of can't have high validity without it. There are three main facets of validity. First, whether we have this conjunction as that our measurement really captures the phenomenon of interest in line with the theoretical concept, as explained before. Also, if the measurement instrument seems appropriate, comprehensible, and usable by the different parties to the research data collection, participants, research assistants, researchers. And third, if there's anything wrong with how the research instrument was applied. So is there anything about who is being studied, but the measurement instrument actually doesn't work for this set of persons, or at least there can be a suspicion that there might be problems in applying this instrument in this context. Okay, an example for you to reflect on: you want to measure political interest in the current Norwegian electorate, and you get a proposal by a colleague that you want to measure that, or they want to measure that in telephone interviews, and ask people how many days per week people watch TV evening news. The telephone survey is being run in a campaign context where volunteers associated with the Progress Party conduct the telephone interviews. So the question is, how would you rate the face validity here, and why, along these 3 points? That's something to reflect on and that we can take up in the lecture again. So what are common sources or common types of face validity problems? The most common things are non-coverage, noise, and overlap. And we can imagine them a little bit in line with this graphical depiction. Let's assume we want to measure political interest, and this box here, this square, represents the entire spectrum or all the facets of the concept of political interest. Then we can have so-called non-coverage problems. Important parts of the concept and the related reality are not captured at all. They are not represented in the data, therefore, and are in consequence lost to the analysis. And if we want to minimize non-coverage, we may use several measures that can measure different parts of the concept and then put them together in the end. This is what happens here. So M1 alone, or say M3 alone, wouldn't be a good representation of the construct of interest. There's lots of facets it doesn't capture. So we come up with additional measurements M1, M2, and M4 to more comprehensively cover the theoretical construct and minimize the non-coverage. Take care, this non-coverage is something different from non-coverage in sampling contexts, particularly survey samples, where non-coverage is something different. This is non-coverage in measurement. Okay? And the other problem that can be the consequence of trying to improve in terms of non-coverage or reduce non-coverage is that it creates noise. Measurements may capture too much. Parts of reality that affect the measurement are not related to the theoretical concept and the phenomenon of interest are suddenly part of what you measure. This is this over coverage that we see here. They can induce noise and even bias into the data. So while adding M1, M2, and M4 gets your coverage up a little bit, it also creates these over coverages. And finally, we may produce overlap. Different parts of the measurement instrument may capture the same part of the reality twice or 3 times. While it's relevant to the theoretical concept, so that's good, this aspect of the concept can then be overrepresented in the data, which may be the problem. Overall, non-coverage is usually the most serious error and should be minimized, but there is a trade-off with the noise that this can create that can be problematic as well. The over-coverage, and mostly when it induces systematic error and bias, this becomes a really big problem, and then it might be the better option to live with some non-coverage than with some systematic bias. This danger needs to be assessed against each other in the specific study at hand, and overlap is usually the least serious of these problems, but should nevertheless be minimized. So this is kind of the conjunction of these 3 kinds of problems that interact with each other.